Good afternoon, residents of Mississippi County. My name is Portia Crawford, and I am an environmental health specialist from the Arkansas Department of Health. I will be presenting to you all about atrazine and the possible adverse health effects. I'm very excited to be doing this presentation because I am a native of Mississippi County. So these are the talking points that we're going to discuss. What is atrazine? The environment entry of atrazine. Routes of exposure, so how it goes from being in the environment to being in the human body, who's most at risk, such as farmers and farm workers, the importance of it to residents of Mississippi County, adverse health effects, so being exposed to it over a short period of time versus being exposed to atrazine over a long period of time, the regulatory and recommendations from the state and federal levels, ways to protect yourself and keep yourself clean of atrazine, and if you are exposed to atrazine, ways that you can ensure the best safety practices. Atrazine is a pesticide used to kill broadleaf and grassy weeds. It is one of the heaviest used pesticides in the United States. Our main focus is going to be on crop life. So when it comes to corn and sorghum, wheat and stuff like that, because in Mississippi County, rural and farm life is essential to the productivity of the county. It has been used before in lawns to help treat residential areas. It is made in the laboratory and it has like a white powder consistency to it. Kind of reminds you of baking powder or baking soda. It is odorless, by the way. It's not very volatile, reactive, or flammable, and it does dissolve in water. It acts in the shoots and leaves of the weeds to stop photosynthesis. It is, however, taken up by all plants, but not all plants are affected in the way that a weed is, because it breaks down before it can affect photosynthesis. It does tend to be used around spring and summer months, and is sprayed before crops grow and after they have emerged from the soil. Now, the way that it enters the environment can be through manufacture, formulation, transport, and disposal. But what's unique about this is the way that it affects the elements like air, soil, and water. So once it hits the air, it is broken down by reactions with other chemicals. And sometimes it does attach to dust, but when it attaches to dust, it doesn't break down. The only way it breaks down is via rainfall. But when you have rainfall, then you have runoff. So the atrazine washes off into streams, lakes, and rivers. It takes a really long time for the chemical to break down because chemical reactions tend to be slower in water. And it does tend to migrate in upper and lower soil surfaces as well. But the good thing with that is it is taken up from plants in that area and it's broken down over a period of time, like during the growing season. However, they can vary between days, months, and in rare instances, years. When it comes to groundwater, it can persist for a very long time, which can lead to it affecting our drinking water. As far as organisms are concerned, algae, bacteria, clams aren't really affected by it. And if other organisms such as fish may consume atrazine, it does not tend to build up in the food chain, which means that it does not accumulate in that organism. The routes of exposure are very important because this is how atrazine makes its way from the environment into our bodies. We can simply breathe in the atrazine ourselves. We can ingest it by accidentally drinking contaminated water, and it can be absorbed via our eyes or skin. This diagram here shows the routes of exposure and the end game, I guess you can say in a way, with what happens on how we basically excrete atrazine out of our body. The one I want you to pay attention to the most is inhalation. So with inhalation, what's important about this is the lungs. I mentioned before about atrazine containing dust. So when particles are trapped in dust, they tend not to be broken down so that can sit in the lungs, and that's never a good thing. And sometimes particles can be so large that they can be swallowed. So that's just something for you to think about. Atrazine does change when it's in your body into metabolites, and some of these metabolites and atrazine enter into your organs and fat. And the good thing is, though, that these metabolites do leave within 24 to 48 hours. So it's always good for our bodies to be as strong as what they can be. So who's most at risk when it comes to atrazine? I mentioned before, farmers, factory workers, farm workers, like this guy here in this picture who's spraying the actual herbicide itself. That's very dangerous. They're constantly being exposed on a daily basis. People who live in areas where it's being applied, or they may be drinking from water that's contaminated in wells that don't run through the public water system. And so they may not have those same resources and get it tested as often. You have those Superfund sites where it was once heavily polluted, and now not all those materials may not be exactly gone. So you have that added to it. And then you have kids who may like to play in the field and dirt themselves just for leisure. And so they can be exposed to atrazine, maybe even putting the dirt in their mouths. So that's never a good thing. So why is this important to the residents of Mississippi County? Well, there definitely needs to be more research specifically in Arkansas and extremely in the area of the upper and lower Delta region. When you look at this map here on the right, you can see how heavily atrazine is being used in our Midwestern states. Well, if you look at the border here in Arkansas, we're about the same color as these Midwestern states. So I think more research definitely needs to be done in these areas because we need our demographics to reflect properly for the residents of our county. And just to let you know how important our state is to the rest of the nation, we are fourth in the nation when it comes to cotton. We are the nation's largest rice growing state. And we are 1 out of 10 of the producing states when it comes to grain, sorghum, or milo, or basically the grain helped to make cereal. So definitely more research needs to be done when it comes to atrazine and like residents of Mississippi County. Health effects can be short-term in nature or long-term, depending on how long a person has been exposed to atrazine and how high of a dosage they've been exposed. So short-term can include muscle spasms, weight loss, and low blood pressure, whereas chronic or long-term effects can be cardiovascular damage, retinal, and some muscle degeneration. When it comes to cancer, the International Agency for Research on Cancer determined that as of right now, atrazine is not considered classifiable carcinogenic, but I think that's going to change, especially with Europe banning atrazine in the early 2000s, and more research is starting to link cancer and atrazine together. The guy pictured here is Dr. Tyrone Hayes, and he pretty much had an amazing study where he had African clawed frogs, and they were constantly exposed to atrazine upwards into 40 parts per billion in precipitation, and their plasma testosterone was tested, and mature males were actually carrying eggs as if they were females. So their histology changed in their larynges and their gonads, and it also showed that atrazine induces aromatase, and it promotes the conversion of testosterone to estrogen. Federal regulations and recommendations for atrazine is very important, especially when we have countries that are banning this pesticide. So we have to make sure whatever we're using that the public comes first and the safety of our citizens. And so with the EPA, this has now become a restricted use pesticide, so only certified persons can use this. Also, too, we do have monitoring programs when it comes to the ecology and drinking water to ensure that concentrations of atrazine do not pose a risk to the environment as well as public safety. And anything more than 3 micrograms per liter is considered not allowable by the EPA standards. Also, OSHA has set a standard of 5 milligrams of atrazine per meter cube when it comes to a workroom space of 8-hour day. And the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health has set a standard of the same, but with a 10-hour shift. Okay, so we can talk about federal regulations and recommendations all day. But what is the state doing for their people? Is the state upholding those standards that the federal government has set? And come to find out, we are. So you guys are definitely in good hands. Our department works in conjunction with the state's public water supply systems to monitor the quality of water. And we do that quite often. We test approximately 105 different community water systems in the state, and we test for contaminants like bacteria, radioactive elements, lead, and copper. Up to 46 pesticides, 22 synthetic organic chemicals, 60 volatile organic chemicals, and 35 inorganic chemicals. Within the 22 synthetic organic chemicals, that does include atrazine. So, when it comes to personal protection and sanitation, you want to make sure that you're following through with these codes set from the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. A lot of this stuff is going to sound self-explanatory, but it's the reason why these are codes because apparently at one point they weren't self-explanatory. So when it comes to your skin and eyes, you want to make sure that you wear the proper eyewear. You want to wear the proper clothing to protect you. If your skin does become contaminated, you do want to wash your skin immediately. When your clothes becomes wet with atrazine, you want to remove that clothing and you want to replace it with fresh new clothes. Also, you want to change daily. So that means that change those clothes at the work site or those premises before you get in your car or go home. And you also want to have a place of business or be in an area where you can be near an eye wash station or do a quick drench of your eyelids if you need to, if you weren't wearing proper eye protection if your eyes are happen to come in contact with some chemicals. When it comes to first aid, the biggest thing I'm going to say with this is seek medical attention when you're dealing with any of these situations. So you want to look for if somebody's having difficulty breathing, they're weak, they're cold or something like that. So if you see that they have chemical irritants in their eye, you want to wash out the eyes immediately with large amounts of water, lifting up the lower and upper lids. Then when it comes to their skin, you want to wash that with soap and water immediately. And if that chemical has penetrated through their clothing, remove that clothing and wash that with wash their skin with soap and water. When it comes to breathing, you want to definitely make sure that this person that's been exposed to large amounts of, say, atrazine, that you get them to an area that's clear and free for fresh air. If breathing has stopped, you want to perform artificial respiration, which is mouth to mouth, helping them breathe. Also, you want to keep that person warm at rest because hypothermia is an issue that can happen with atrazine exposure. And finally, if they swallow something, please get medical attention immediately. You want to get medical attention with all of these, But swallowing that will be the first thing that you would do instead of trying to do some of these other interventions. So the take-home message from this presentation was to include our residents from Mississippi County and let them know that we see you guys. There is not much research when it comes to our demographics per se. We have the Midwest to kind of fall on. However, that doesn't mean that knowing about atrazine is obsolete. And that doesn't mean that our federal and state agencies were going to be lax when it comes to making sure that, we all have clean drinking water, clean food, or whatever the case is. And this is just letting you guys know that we see you. Being in that area in the Delta region, atrazine exposure is very real. And you guys can actually, know a little more about the symptoms, because oftentimes some illnesses or some symptoms get confused with other ailments, and that's just not the case. So knowing those codes from the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health makes a difference, and knowing when to seek medical attention, and knowing that if you have acute effects versus chronic effects makes a difference. So with all that being said, the next slide here shows my references. Most of my references come from the CDC. They are an amazing tool to use when you want to know the most up-to-date information. And like I said, I'm from Mississippi County, so I know someone wants to know who I'm related to. So come over and talk to me and ask me all the questions you need to. Thank you.